Okay, so I would like to call the business meeting of the Portland Board of Public Education to order. It is Tuesday, December 19th, 2023. We are meeting here in a hybrid format, I believe. Do we, is Board Member Billy online yet? No. But she will be shortly. So some people will be here in Casco Bay and others online via Zoom. Just a quick note, there is no executive session tonight, even though it listed it in the title of the agenda, but no executive session tonight. So let's go ahead and establish a quorum. Deputy Superintendent Townsend, will you please call the roll?
Member Ali.
Present.
Member Bilyeu. Vice Chair Bondo.
Present.
Member Bryden.
Here.
Member Figdor.
Here.
Member Grant.
Here.
Member Noor.
Present.
Member Opperman.
Here.
Representative Kantiba. Representative Knight.
Here.
Representative McDonald.
Here.
Representative Rosado.
Here.
Representative Muriwa.
Present.
And Chair Lentz.
Here. Perfect. Thank you. And now the Pledge of Allegiance.
Flag of the United States of America, republic for which it stands, one nation.
Portland Public Schools recognizes the original inhabitants of the land on which our city and schools stand. The Wolastoqiyik, or Maliseet, Micmac, Penobscot, and Passamaquoddy tribes, known collectively as the Wabanaki Confederacy, or People of the Dawnland. We are honored to have Wabanaki children among our students today, and as a district, we are committed to making the past, present, and future of Wabanaki peoples visible in our schools and classrooms. And tonight, Board Member Bryden is going to read our mission for us.
Certainly, Chair. Portland Public Schools is responsible for ensuring a challenging, relevant, and joyful education that empowers every learner to make a difference in the world. We build relationships among families, educators, and the community to promote the healthy development and academic achievement of every learner.
Thank you, Board Member Bryden. And next, we're going to move into public comment. I don't see anybody here in the room. I'm going to talk slowly just in case anybody online wants to raise their hand. Okay, so seeing no public comment, I'm now going to close public comment, and then we're going to move into board introductions. So we have a new group here, and we had a packed agenda last time, so I thought we would build it into this this meeting. But to just go around and introduce ourselves to orient us to who's in the room here, and then I think we may actually. Superintendent Scallon, let's plan on introducing other cabinet members as well, so students can be oriented to them as well. So we'll start by, if you want to do your name, your pronouns, either your district or your school, and then what brought you to the board here? And Charlotte, what do you think? Can you start us off?
Yeah,
okay,
for sure.
Go for it.
Thank you. So my name is Charlotte McDonald. My pronouns are she, her. And I'm from Portland High School. And what brought me to the board? So honestly, I hadn't really heard of this position before like my junior year. I knew that it existed, but I didn't know that it was like as available. And I heard Caden, the previous Portland High School representative, talking about it in a class meeting. And I've always loved taking advantage of leadership opportunities in my life. And I thought that this could be a really great way to help advocate for my school, support the district, and just share my thoughts with how to improve things. So yeah, and I'm super excited to be here. So thank you everyone for welcoming me. And thank you for the LL Bean thing. I'm really excited about that.
Thanks. Representative McDonald, go ahead.
My name is Riley Knight. My pronouns are they, them. I go to the PATH school and my sending school is Portland High School. And I came to the board because my PATHS teacher offered me the position and I went, oh, that sounds fun. Sure.
Awesome.
So thank you for Mr. Bean.
My name's Shai Muriwa. I go to Deering. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm on the board because I'm here to take action.
My name is Jaden Montero Rosado. My pronouns are he, him from Casco Bay High School, and I'm here on the board because I wanted a chance to serve my fellow students. I would like to eventually get into public service, become an attorney, and become a politician. So this is like a good chance to get some practice at public service.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. I'm Ben Grant. I am an attorney and a politician, so can work out.
This is what the future is.
You got a lot better hair than I do, so hang on to that. I'm an at-large member of the school board. I live in District 3. I have 2 kids in the public schools, one at Ocean Ave and one at Portland High School. And I'm here because I want to advocate for good education for our kids.
Vice Chair Bondo, you're up.
Yeah.
Hi, so my name is Mickey Bondo. I am a District 1 rep and also the Vice Chair of the Portland Board of Education. And I also, my pronouns is she, her, and hers. So the reason why I really ran for election 5 years ago is exactly to have a representation. Because when I look at our student bodies, is that representation on the leadership decision where we can make the policy more inclusive. So it was a reason for me to really run for election so they can represent the missing voices. Yes.
Thank you. I'm Sarah Lintz. My pronouns are she, hers. And I am chair of the board and also an at-large representative. I came to the board because I believe in the power of education as a social change agent. And I also really wanted to protect the wonderful work that's been done in the district and move it forward.
Great. I'm Ryan Scallon, superintendent. I use he, him. And I think people in Portland Public Schools for the last 5 months have spent enough time seeing my face and reading about my bio, so I will pass it to Aaron.
Good evening, everybody. Aaron Townsend. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm currently the deputy superintendent here. And I come to this work to try and, with the hope of schools making a better, more just, inclusive community, society. And that starts with improving outcomes for students who schools have not historically served. So that's what I'm here for.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yusra Ali. I use she, her, hers. I am a proud Bulldog class of 18. And I wanted to run for this position because I want to represent my community and for the people who don't have access to this kind of space. And also I consider myself a representative of all students, not just Portland High. And I just want to speak for the student experience, just like all of you are here to do. So I'm excited to work with everybody.
Hello, everyone. I'm Emily Figdor. I'm the District 2 representative. My pronouns are she, her, hers. This is my 6th year on the board. And I first got involved for 2 reasons. One, I saw that our district was really starved of resources, that our city was prioritizing other things and not our schools. And second, I was really moved by the vision of our past superintendent, Javier Botana, to put equity at the center of the work we do in Portland Public Schools and to rebuild a school district around serving our most marginalized students. And that's the work I'm still committed to. And I look forward to working with all of you.
I'm Julie Opperman, District 3, her, hers, and I have 2 children who were the 2004, 2008 graduates of Deering. And I'm a school teacher. I was a school teacher for 40 years, and I care deeply about every single student I had in those 40 years. And I think every single student at Portland school system needs attention and support, and that the teachers need the support to be able to help those students.
Hello, everyone. My name is Fatuma. My pronouns are she, hers, and I'm from District 4. Main reason I joined the school board was to represent the student voices and the community voices that weren't at the table, just like Mickey said, and I hope I do that.
Sarah Bryden, she, her, District 5. I love public schools, just generally. I went to public school here in Portland, and I love the concept. I listen to podcasts about education in my free time. I mean, so that's why I'm here.
Nice. We're going to ask members of the executive team as well as our union partners if they will join us to come up and introduce. While they're walking up, I will just tell you that there are 3 members that are not here that we will do introductions at another time. They unfortunately had other commitments. So Dr. Grace Valenzuela is our Director of Communications, Community, Families. She is in the Philippines right now. Helene D. Bartolomeo is our Executive Director of Finance. She had unfortunately had another commitment tonight that prevented her from being here. And Dr. Angela Atkinson-Duina is dealing with a family situation. Her father passed away yesterday. And so she is with that. And so with that, I guess,
Really-
Dr. Warren, you'll start us off.
Actually, we just had another student representative join us online, so let's do her first. So Student Representative Kintiba, if you wanted to just quickly introduce yourself, you can, your name, your pronoun, your school, and what brought you to the board. Let's see if we can get Julie.
Hi, my name is Julie Dove Kintiba. I'm from Portland Adult Education. My pronouns she or hers. Representing adult education because I will be a voice for adult education.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay. Hi, I am Sarah Warren. I am, my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm the Executive Director for Operations. I just joined the district in August, and I love young people. I love learning, and my goal is to make schools safe, welcoming, and joyful for all of our students. So that's why I'm here. And I'm back home in Maine, which is really exciting too.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Barrett Wilkinson. I'm the Executive Director for People and Equity. I've been with Portland Schools for 6 years, and 5 years before that, I was with the City of Portland. So I'm very passionate about public service, as you were saying, Jaden, and look forward to getting to work with all of you. My pronouns are he and they.
Hi all, I'm Andy Wiseman Summers. I'm the Executive Director of the Foundation for Portland Public Schools. I use she, her pronouns. I've been in this position for almost 4 years now. And I also, actually it went by fast. I have a daughter who graduated from Casco Bay in 2021. So she went to King and East End as well. And I started my career as a teacher. I've always worked in education and in nonprofits. I'm also really passionate about public schools and the Portland Public Schools in particular. My role is to bring external resources, volunteers, partnerships, and donations to the district.
Thank you.
My name is Abdullahi Ahmed, and I am the Executive Director of Secondary Schools. I have been in the district since 2001 in different capacities. I used to be EdTech, teacher, assistant principal, and now I'm serving as the Executive Director of Secondary Education. And I live in the city. I have 2 daughters who graduated from Deering High School, and a son and a daughter who go to Deering High School as well. So the reason I am in the schools or in education is just for the young people and to make a difference in the lives and of the young people. So that's the main drive that I go every day to school and to work. So thanks.
Sorry. Hi.
Hello, can you hear me? My name is Carrie Dowdy. I am currently the union president, but I'm coming out of 29 years in the elementary classroom in Portland. What's inspired me to do the work now that I do is when I was in 8th grade, my mother, who was an elementary art teacher, went to law school and became a labor attorney. So I was sort of heavily, in conversation at all times, went to different negotiations with her and thought about that a lot. Why did I not do this sooner? I loved being a classroom teacher. I loved teaching 8 and 9-year-olds. And it just took me a really long time to feel like I wanted to do something different. And now I feel like in the work that I do is all intended to improve learning conditions for students. That is at the heart of everything that we do. Thanks.
Hi, good evening. Jen Cooper. I am the EdTech Union President. I've been working in Portland now for about 10 years. I've been in education for much, much longer. I'm not going to say. That's me old. And as everybody has said, my passion is to work with students and just see their successes first. I work with a lot of students who have not had a lot of success in school, and to just see their growth as they, stay in our classroom is an amazing thing to see. So it's one of the reasons why I do the work I do.
Hello, my name is William Lamb. Excuse me. I'm the at-large representative for the base union that covers all our ESPs, educational support professionals. I've been a bus driver for 8 years. My wife and I graduated from Portland schools back in the 1900s. We live in District 3. We have 2 students in the public schools, and I'm here because I thought it's important work and satisfying work to work for my community, and as a resident of Portland, it's surprising how much the public schools reach everyone's lives. So thank you for your work.
Thank you, Bill. We're lucky. Also, just like how cool it was to hear everybody talk and listen to how much it overlapped with the mission of the district. So just thank you all for being here and for the work that you give. Super appreciative. And so now I'm going to give some short remarks. They're not going to be long because I gave a lot of remarks last night as the state of the schools, and then I will turn it over to the superintendent. But last night I delivered the state of the schools at the city council and reinforced our commitment to working with the city as we both tackle significant budgetary challenges. It was also a time to highlight all the tremendous people and work within the district. This morning, we also met with our state representatives to align on the budget deficit and challenges that we're facing and how we can better work together to advocate for additional funding and legislation that supports our district and other districts where property valuations have increased dramatically. There'll be more to come in the new year about both the budget and our strategic plan, but also tonight in one of our updates, we're going to be getting a lot more information on our strategic plan. This is the last meeting of our calendar year, if you can believe it. And I'm hopeful that everyone towards the end of the year can take some time to be with the people that you love, to rest and to reflect on this year past. That's it for me tonight. So take it away.
Good evening. I'm going to present on 2 of our progress monitors tonight, so I'm going to do it from up here. Let me just pull up the slides for a quick second.
Oh, and while you're doing that, just want to note, students will start their remarks next year. We put this on the agenda, but we're not quite ready for that, so we'll do that in the new year.
Great, thank you. First off, just a huge thank you to everybody, our students, our staff, and our families who helped us navigate the storms yesterday. Obviously, a difficult situation, and one where we really tried to prioritize making sure that all students were safe and taken care of. And so I also know that put folks in spots where they were helping out with dismissal in pouring rain and working to make sure the students stayed safe and were escorted to bathrooms where there wasn't as much light as we wanted. And so just a big thank you to everyone who assisted in that part. Before we go into progress monitoring, I just want to take a minute. We oftentimes recognize academic achievement and athletic achievement as seasons close. I also want to recognize some of our school musicians that in the last month were identified for either the all-state or the second region band, chorus, orchestra. And so you can see up on the screen our students that were recognized this year for all-state. And so congratulations to them, and just a huge recognition to our staff that go above and beyond to prepare our students for this competition and to be ready for these types of recognition. So just a big thank you to both groups. Tonight, as we know, each month we progress monitor. And so this month we are progress monitoring objective 4. We will progress monitor 4 goals, which we'll go over in a second. Dr. Warren and I are each going to split and do 2 of them. And then we will come back and share an update on our progress relative to those goals at our April 2nd meeting. And so that's the cadence that we are looking at tonight. Objective 4, overall, we are on track to continue our work around strengthening our organizational coherence through district-wide systems, strategy, and budget. I will acknowledge that the launch of our new payroll system has slowed some of our work and taken some of our capacity from planning on fiscal year 25, but we do anticipate being able to catch up in January into that work. So just want to acknowledge that. And so you will see up there the 4 objectives or the 4 sort of initiatives and priorities that sit in this area. And you will see that right now we consider ourselves on track for 3 of them and with the catch-up work to be done around the fiscal piece. With that, I'm going to pass it to Dr. Warren, who will talk about priority 1.
Good evening again. All right, so the first of the sub-objectives here is around our standard operating procedures. This is a large and evolving piece of work where we're essentially trying to make sure that we put in writing the concrete steps we need to take to handle all the different aspects of how we run the school district. So we've been working on standard operating procedures that we've prioritized as sort of first round, the things that we thought were most essential to get done across our different offices and areas of work. And so far it's going well, but we regard this as a learning process as we go. We didn't have a set of standard operating procedures. That doesn't mean that nothing existed. There's a lot of thinking, a lot of work that's come before us. And in some cases, we're just trying to capture that and get it down. In other cases, we're actually trying to create new standard operating procedures. So we are in round 1 now, and we'll start the next round soon. That will include not only building the procedures, but then providing some orientation to folks that need to be able to use them, and then creating, at the moment, they're living in a Google Drive, but they will have a more formal home in a hub by the end of the year. So we did round 1 drafts, and we're working on revising those and getting ready to get those out to people in the start of the year in January. Again, we created an initial sort of holding place for and filing system for the SOPs, and we are now, having drafted those, moving towards the next phase. And in January, we'll also start thinking about what's the next set of priorities. So I think in terms of what makes this hard, one of the things is just that it's a big body of work, right? We need many things, and we're trying to sort of build and fly at the same time. So it's a little bit of a process for us, and I think that we'll get to a great place by the end of the year. But it's a learning process. And then the other thing is just editing and calibrating our SOPs. So as we started looking at these together as an executive team, they come in at different levels, and people may approach the thinking around how to do an SOP in a different way. So we're trying to get them to be a little bit more standardized so that they make sense, and they can be easily accessed by people across the district. So the next steps, again, we're in the process of finalizing, and then we'll start rolling out this first round. We will be putting them into a more formal library, and then we will, in January, start working on the second set of priorities.
I had just a question. What would be an example of an SOP?
Yeah, so a quick example of one that's in the first round of prioritization is student registration. So how does a student register? What gets done centrally? What gets done at the school? What needs to be collected in that process? With the idea being that we have a new lead secretary at LISETH, right? And so she is doing an amazing job. And I bet we would have made her life a lot easier if we'd been able to share with her and train with her on a standard operating procedure for registration, as opposed to what happened, which was her learning through the process and through reaching out to her colleagues who've been unbelievably supportive, right? Because one of the things that has stood in the space where you would necessarily see standard operating procedures is actually the capacity of the district and people willing to jump in. But sometimes it results in uneven experiences. And so we're trying to make that standard.
Thank you.
Are standard procedures admin, or are they also like things teachers learn? Like, is there a set of standard procedure that teachers also learn? Or is it just like an admin kind of like filing kind of thing?
Yeah, so let me do that. And then, sorry, I broke my own protocol. We'll come back, we'll do the rest of the presentation and then do it. But just on that piece, the standard operating procedures that we're primarily talking about in this case are around operational pieces. And so I would say that 80 to 90% of them are really administrative facing, whether you put that at the principal, the secretary, myself level. It is not about the instructional practices. So the second piece is that we are doing a 5-year strategic plan. We've talked about this, I think, at almost every board meeting, but we do have this as a priority for this year. And so we did want to progress monitor and share an update on it. Our two big goals for the end of this year is, one, is that we have established the new plan, and second, that we've started to build some muscle and some capacity around this idea of progress monitoring. Right now, we consider ourselves on track for this work, and want to acknowledge that it's really hard work and tackling a large body of work. And so a thank you to both Chair Lentz and Vice Chair Bondo, who serve on this, along with 14 other members of the community. They've done remarkable work in short order, right? So they have established a number of pieces that serve as sort of a guiding spot, including some common aspirations, some key priorities and underlying initiatives. And we have monitored at this point. This is our third of these monitoring. I think there are a couple of challenges that I just want to highlight around this. So the first is just tackling this body of work along with everything else that is going on. And then second is around building our capacity and getting ourselves at the central office and at the school office in the habit of really having priorities and sticking to them, and then monitoring and sharing out on them. There's a third that I just want to name, which is probably something that we should have done well at the beginning of this process, is that sometimes folks go through a strategic planning process and they think that at the end of it, they're going to have the 5-year goals, the 5-year initiatives, and every action step that sits underneath it. That's not our intention within this. In fact, our intention is to build a plan that really lives and can exist throughout those 5 years, even if we face challenges or opportunities along the way. And so when we look here, right, you can see, it's a little bit small, but you can see 5 key areas. We're going to call them priorities. And under each of them, well, they're not listed, there will be 4 to 6 initiatives that do this work. And so the 5 key priorities are equity, achievement, whole student, people, and systems. You will see that this closely mirrors actually the headline priorities within the Portland Promise. I think that was intentional by the steering committee to continue to build off of the work that had been started there and to not start from scratch. And so where you will see changes is around the initiatives. When you do get to a spot where we have the final strategic plan, that will come around March 5th. And what you should anticipate seeing in there is, again, not every action for 5 years, but instead you will see how these 4 to 6 initiatives under each of the priorities maps out. And so we think about it in sort of really 3 phases. One is around the development and the identification of the key actions there. What are we going to do that really makes this work and makes this have outcomes for students? The second is around launching and implementing the work. And the third is around monitoring it and making sure that we are tracking, that we continue to do the actions we committed to, and that it has an impact on students. And so that's what you will see within each of the initiatives. The work is similar to the calendar that we have talked about and looked at before. We will continue to run focus groups the week of January 8th to get feedback on an initial draft. For individuals that cannot participate in focus groups in person, because we know that that's time is limited and in a busy time, we will have a survey up and available on our website. We will also run a second round of focus groups the week of February 12th. And so there are two opportunities around this. And then we'll be sharing it at the board. And we got to figure out the exact timing on this because March 5th is stacking up to be a heck of a meeting with a lot of topics on it. And so we'll just have to figure out exactly what that looks like and how to map that out. The second initiative I'm going to report out on is around our fiscal year 25 budget. At this point, we think that there's three things that will measure success on this. One is the successful transition to the ADP new payroll system. One of the things that Chair Lentz spoke about in her State of the Schools yesterday was that there's a difference between saying and actually seeing it in action. And so we know that we need to build trust back in our systems. And so getting ADP right is part of that. And so that has taken up a significant amount of capacity, but is aligned with this. The second is around making sure that we have clear systems when we're in ADP. And the third is that we deliver as a collective a balanced, transparent, and voter-approved budget for fiscal year 25. And so that's the third piece of it. We've talked enough about ADP, I think, on this for just a minute, but just to highlight two of the pieces that have happened around the budget is we do have now an established budget template that is giving us guidance around both anticipated revenue as well as some of our expense planning. And so that will help guide our work as we move forward over winter break and into January. At the same time, we just want to continue to acknowledge that this will be a challenging budget season. And so that is one of the key obstacles that we will have to face as a collective on this. And then you can see up there sort of a collection of three things on the calendar. One is around the ADP work with the first payroll on January 12th. The second piece you can see is around the SIP process. That is the capital improvement process that we kicked off in partnership with our finance committee last week and started that process. And the third is around the development of the budget. With us still in works with the city to finalize the dates on which we'll be working with the finance committee and with the city around approval. And so we're waiting for the city on that, and we'll provide updates as soon as we have them. They have new committee members and are still working through exactly what their dates will be. And so, but it does seem like it'll line up pretty close to the calendar that we previously provided with those dates.
Okay, great. We presented on our draft emergency plan back on November 21st, so I'm going to keep this relatively brief. But we are on track with the work that we are planning to do and need to get done around our emergency planning. And that said, there's a huge amount of work left to do. So we're cognizant of that and we're continuing to move through it. So we need to go back and finalize our district-wide plan. So by June, we will have that, we hope, board-approved plan. We are continuing to roll out training around ALICE for the active shooter protocols. A lot of that work has already been done, but we are continuing on, and eventually we'll have training for our students as well. And then regularly convening our district-wide safety and emergency management committee. So I'll talk more about that in a minute. So thus far, we did draft a plan. It was based on previous plans, so it wasn't brand new. We are working on revising that and we'll bring it back to the board, ultimately with a vote in May. We have also created school-based plans, which we'll revisit, but they have been in place since before the start of the school year. Again, we've been doing ALICE training. And then we've had our partners from Portland Police Department coming into schools and individual sites to help look at the site-specific issues related to emergency management. And we've got a group of wonderful administrators, social workers, and others who've come together to look at how we can best adapt our ALICE lessons in a way that's developmentally appropriate for our students. The current challenges, again, it's this building and flying thing. We know that we need to get this work done. We need to get it done relatively quickly, but we want to make sure it's done really well. So we're trying to balance those things, the urgency of the work with needing to do it really well. So our next steps, did I miss one? So we're, again, finalizing our staff trainings. We've got 4 schools that are running through the last of the training. The district safety committee will come together in January. And then the final trainings, as I mentioned before, and then bringing the final plan back to first the committee and back to the board for a vote. And I just want to clarify, again, that the plan is sort of the comprehensive plan, but then tied back to the first area that we talked about, we're also doing a full set of standard operating procedures that go with the plan. That's the end.
With that, we can open it up to questions.
Great. So if you have a question, you can raise your hand and I'll call on you. Student Representative McDonald, go ahead.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So I have 2 questions. My first question is regarding the 5-year strategic plan. And I was wondering if there are any students on the steering committee that are kind of contributing to those ideas because they're, mainly about the student experience.
Yes, so we do. We have both a student representative, a current student, as well as an alum. There's actually probably more than one alum, but there's one that's specifically earmarked as the alum lens. So yes, and our intention is to run focus groups. We will obviously not be able to get the feedback of all students, but that we can have feedback.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question is there information being given to students about the emergency protocols just mentioned, like the, for example, the ALICE active shooter protocol? Because we've heard of it briefly, but not like super in depth before. And I feel like it might be advantageous to have students, on the same page about that.
Yes, exactly. So that's great. So we will be rolling that out for our students. We wanted, again, this is one of those things where we're balancing the urgency with getting it right. So we needed to make sure that our teachers, our administrators, our other staff were well versed in it first and that they were ready and understood what we were talking about. And also the group that I just mentioned that's working on adapting it really for students so that it's developmentally appropriate for students of different ages. I mean, the students at the high school level can handle, a certain amount of information and training, whereas we need something very different for our younger students. So that's what we're working on now. And I expect that we'll have our things ready to go for students in the early spring.
Okay, thank you. Because I know that the uncertainty part of it is like one of the scariest things for students. So that's just important to me. Thank you so much for answering my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative McDonald. Board Member Victor, and then Ali.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to Dr. Warren and Dr. Scallon for presenting this tonight. My question is with respect to the strategic plan. And I'm wondering if the board is going to have an opportunity to review the draft prior to the focus groups, because that feels important. If the focus groups start providing feedback and it's kind of off the mark from where the board wants to go, it feels like we'll figure that out late in the process.
We can certainly look back at the calendar and see what is possible there. I don't remember off the top of my head. There is another time where on the board calendar we are coming back to look at the strategic plan. It was not before the January 8th week. And so maybe we could follow up outside of this to figure out when and how to do that. I think that let's follow up on that. I'm not sure what the right answer is on that or like what's possible. And so happy to connect on that.
Did you have another question, Board Member Victor? Go ahead.
I had more of a specific question, just looking at the priorities that have been outlined so far as the strategic plan. In the last few years, we talked about the concept a lot of collective efficacy and how that's so critical in moving student achievement when educators feel the word empowered is here, but I guess I understand it a little bit differently. And so I'm just curious if that's the concept we're going for. And I think the work we did around collective efficacy was important. And I hope we continue and see that work through.
Yeah, no, just because I wasn't here for the first bit of that conversation, I'm going to see if Aaron wants to jump in here. What I will say is that when we look at the initiatives that are here, a large part of the initiative work is not about the idea of rolling out new curriculum. It is really about continuing to build the collective skill of the district, including professional development, the use of protocols to look at student work, all of that. And so I think it is aligned with that. But Aaron, I don't know if you want to jump in and add anything.
That was my first initial reaction was, yeah, we haven't been talking about it as a separate kind of initiative, right? But the components of things that we're talking about, building, ensuring we have data systems and routines, right, to be able to monitor goals. So as I think about the components of what generates collective efficacy, I can see elements in it, but we haven't been using that framing explicitly. So.
Raleigh? I hope I'm loud enough. Sorry. So I have two questions that are kind of the same and one that's not. For the monitoring progress and for surveys, is it possible to post those online so that everyone can have access to what we're doing and where we are at, and also kind of serve as, what is the word? Accountability that, okay, we're not just saying things, we're actually doing them. And then the third question would be, their priorities and then their initiatives?
Initiatives, yeah.
Initiatives. These seem like a little too much. How are we going to make sure that we're not biting off more than we can chew?
So let me answer your second question. And then I need a little bit of clarification on the first one. So on the second one, around biting off more, I think that's exactly the tension that we are wrestling with and that the steering committee is wrestling with, which is how do we make sure that we're acting with a level of urgency and big enough to see outcomes change for students, and that we're not creating a false sense of what we can accomplish. And so I think that, for members of the steering committee, that was almost the question that was exactly posed to them, right? And so when they were looking at initiatives, it was if you're going to add something, what are you taking away? For exactly that reason. I think that one of the ways that we're trying as well to hold ourselves accountable to that in the plan, I guess two things is, one is we're putting out there along with this some goals that we will be measuring and reporting on each year about how we see student achievement results, school climate results, et cetera, improve. And so that's one way that we're holding ourselves accountable to it. And the second is, in some cases, you may feel like I do, like we want to tackle everything next year. And when you look at what will come of the strategic plan, you will see that there's things that even if we wanted to do it next year, we're not going to launch it or design it next year. We're going to do it in year 3 of the plan. And so that's part of the way we're doing it. Can you help clarify just the piece that you were talking about publicly posting the monitoring? Which piece were you talking about?
Yeah, that in the survey, for example, is if we're just taking surveys and people are not aware of, okay, everyone is feeling the same way that I'm feeling, I'm not just experiencing things on my own. I feel like it would be beneficial for teachers, students, and administrators, whoever takes surveys, to know these are the results, and they'll be dealt with this way. You're not just taking surveys just to take them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense to me. So let us look into how we can make sure that we're publicly sharing the results. Obviously, there's some things where we may get into specifics about individual schools or that type of thing where we're going to want to, make some anonymity to it. And the idea of we asked for the feedback, we got it, and we're acting on it makes a lot of sense. And so let me take that feedback back and see how we're going to do that.
Thank you.
Board Member Bryden?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. as always, for all the great information, and also just specifically on so my questions have to do with the SOPs. And I want to preface it with my level of excitement, because anybody who's been in a meeting with me has heard me say, write it down, write it down, write it down. I'm so glad you're writing it down, like applause. So my two questions are, can you talk a little bit about your plans for ongoing maintenance of the library of SOPs? Because it's a snapshot in time, and as things change and version control and all that wonderful stuff, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, such a good question. And I won't pretend to have all the answers yet. I think we're still working it through, but right now we have a template that we created. So everybody's using a standard template. And part of the template is making note of when it was created, when it was most recently updated. And then we have a common filing system. So everything is in the filing system in a way that we can, manage it. But over time, we will have to put certain, I think, milestones on the calendar where everybody comes back and reviews their SOPs to make sure that they are up to date. And some people will just do it as they know that there are changes being made. That's great, but we will have to have it be formalized as well. So we're sure that we're updating. Yeah.
Love it. My other question has to do with the SOPs and how that overlays with the ADP and the budget stuff. So I'm curious about whether that first batch of SOPs, the priority items, is that where the ADP so many letters, where those SOPs live, or some of them, and then some of them you're going to have to wait until the ADP process really gets rolling? Like how are they oriented?
Yeah, so it's kind of both. It's we, like with the larger process, within the smaller bodies of work, including ADP, we pick the things that were the most immediate priority for that. So there will be sort of the first, I think, 3 or 4 SOPs that go with the ADP initial rollout, and then undoubtedly more that come after that. And as I said earlier, like the more we create these, the more we realize we need more. So it's sort of it's a process that's probably going to keep giving life to new SOPs as we go. Yeah.
Super. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Bryden, Student Representative Knight, and I'm so sorry, Vice Chair, you're up next.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple different questions in a couple different places. First, I want to know about the budget for 2025. I've heard that we're having major cuts. What is that looking like so far? What are our broad strokes? Because I know that you're unable to get the details right now due to the ADP and the new system, et cetera, but what are the effects so far of the foreseen budget cut?
You want to do all of your questions, or want me to do them one at a time? Because they're in different areas. You want me to do them one at a time?
Give me a general summary.
Oh, I can answer your question. I was saying, okay. So let me do it in sort of 2 shorts. So first, I think that our strategic plan, and the reason we're sort of cadence or sequence of events, is to make sure that our strategic plan is identifying the district's priorities and key initiatives, and so that our budget is aligned to it. And so that's the first piece. And so for a key piece around early indications around where there will be both investments as well as challenges is actually looking at the draft that comes out. And again, recognizing Board Member Figdor's comments about how do we sequence this and how do we get feedback in it, right? It's going to be a very blurry draft in the sense that it'll come more into focus as time goes on. But that's where you'll really see the priorities for the district and in the budget. In terms of the budget and the challenges that we face, I think this year it is real that we face a very difficult and challenging budget. There's 3 things that I would point to as being challenges on our finances. The first is that we have approximately, it depends on how you want to look at it in terms of calendar of the year, but let's say $9 million in COVID funds that are used this year. About $7.5 million of that money is going towards people and personnel. That funding does not repeat next year, and there is no funding that comes in its place. And so we have approximately $158 million budget overall this year, once you include local, state, grants, and $9 million is a downward pressure on our budget, losing those funds. The second piece is that, like everybody, the district is gets hit by inflation and by increasing costs. And what we do this year costs us more to do next year. And that is everything from salaries and contracts going up to just the cost of purchasing paper being more expensive next year than this year. The average contract that we have goes up right around 3%. This year, inflation this past year was around 3%, a little bit more than that year over. And then we have an increase in benefit costs that we don't know yet. But so if you just assume that $158 million budget, 3% increase, just as like a back of the napkin, it's too rough to like put it down on paper and say this is definite. At this point is just under a $5 million piece. And then the third piece, and we had a really good conversation with our state delegation about this today, that there's funding that we receive from the state that comes through both the EPS formula as well as other avenues. Okay. As one of the example of those other avenues, this past year, we received around $800,000 in an EL hardship fund. At this point, it's not possible to pin down exactly what the EPS formula will be or which additional lines or budgets that may be available to the district come about. One of the challenges with the EPS formula for a district like Portland, where you see increasing property values, is while the district has more students this year, it has more students that qualify as low income and more students who qualify as multilingual. All work in the favor of the district getting more funds. There's other pressure on the EPS formula, and that's based on the district's assumption of what we can afford to pay. And that what we can afford to pay is based on what the state estimates as our property value. And small changes in the formula in terms of the assumed rate at which we tax has significant impact on state funding because it's multiplying against a $14 billion number, right? And so if you move 1/10 of a point, 2/10 of a point multiplied by $14 billion, you get a pretty significant change in state funding. We will have that official number in terms of EPS, not some of the other paths for funding, but the EPS funding we should have at the end of January. And so we will have more clarity there. But we are anticipating that because our property valuation at the state level went up 22% from last year to 23, that is a significant factor in the EPS formula. And so we do expect some pressure on how much funding we receive from the state.
Thank you very much. And then I suppose that brings me to my second question, which is not nearly as in depth. I just want to know who is voting for school budget and how.
Yeah.
That's
great question.
So first, I don't know if you, Chair Lentz, wanted to say anything about the last answer, because it looked like you were about to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to note that if it felt like it was as clear as mud, that explanation that you just got there, that's like a totally, no, it was great, but the whole process is just like very complicated. So if it feels like that didn't land all the way for new board members, like we'll talk about it 50 million more times before we get to the vote. So just know that there's a ton of factors and we're getting more information every day about what it's going to look like. So just buckle up and we'll get there.
perfect. Thank you so much, Chair.
Oh, yeah.
Or do you want to add to that? I was going to answer the second part. So first off, I just wanted to be noted for the record that at the last board meeting, Deputy Superintendent Townsend was complimented on having a sharp suit. And this week I got commented that the description was like mud, which I fully appreciate.
It's a very good description. It just feels like mud.
Yeah. I think that one of the pieces that I just want to be clear about on the budget is there are pieces that are outside of our hands. And the board has been intentional over the last several years about building a fund reserve. And so that's one piece I should have mentioned, which is there is a fund reserve and a fund balance that is available for the district to tap into to help offset some of these cuts. It is not likely that the fund balance will be able to cover all of it. And so that's a piece. In terms of the vote, there's actually 3 votes, 4 votes that will happen for the budget. So the first is the Finance Committee will vote to move it forward to the board. That happens, I believe, on the calendar early April. The second is by this board that, again, will vote end of April type window. Third is by our city council.
Their committee does first.
Oh, their committee. So let's go 5.
Yeah.
This is like a good civics lesson here for me. So their committee will vote on it, their finance committee. Then the city council will vote on it, and then it will go to voters. And so part of the challenge that I think we will all face is going through a difficult budget season and threading the needle of finding the right landing spot that makes sure that what we identify in our strategic plan and what we identify in our mission and what we identify as our key priorities and goals that we fund, and know that we also have community members who are on fixed incomes and rising property values or rising property taxes impact. And so there's a balance on this. And I think part of our challenge is to make sure that we're spending our funds as effectively as possible for students and most aligned to our strategic plan. And then let me cede time to board member Figdor.
Thank you, Superintendent. I just wanted to help fill out the timeline. So there's no budget yet, as maybe you've gathered, as the superintendent was alluding to. He presents his budget to us at our March 5th meeting. So that's when we'll see it for the first time, and that starts the process. And as you heard, all the different votes. I just want to say, as student board members, your voice will be really important, and you'll have an opportunity, especially if you come to finance committee meetings, which you're definitely invited to, but also acknowledging all that you're juggling. So at the finance committee and also before the full board, that you'll have an opportunity to help us make the best decision, especially in a time where resources are going to be really tight and we're going to have to make some tough decisions.
Thank you very much, board member. My final question is about the ALICE protocol. I feel that even if there is not currently a perfect amount of information or a perfect curriculum for students to learn, especially at the high school level, we still need to know a protocol of any kind, because the only time I have ever heard ALICE mentioned was once at the beginning of the year by one teacher in passing. And considering the amount of lockdowns, threats, and other recent issues surrounding gun violence, I believe it is critical that there is any kind of guideline or any kind of explanation, regardless of its perfection. Because while I may not be able to speak for every single person, I could speak for a group of people who would rather have a flawed practice than no practice at all.
So I appreciate the comment and the concern. And I think, as Dr. Warren said, we're trying to find the right balance, right? So there's pieces of the ALICE training, even if we don't name it as such, that you have already received and gotten support in, right? So ALICE is really based on the idea that it's a change in practice from what used to be the protocol for an active shooter situation, right? The previous protocol was around, going into the corner, locking the door, that. They have since changed the protocol based on police research on what is the most effective way to respond. And I'm going to get the the way Alice calls them wrong, but just go with me for a second. One of them is around that, is about locking the door, securing yourself in place because the shooter is near the location. That's the same drill and the same protocol that happens with a shelter in place. The second is around leaving the space and leaving the space like a run type idea because you're in a completely different part of the building. That is the same drill, same process that you go through with a fire drill. The third piece is around fighting and pushing back on it. That's a very different training. And for folks who, when they go through this, can actually be a very traumatic experience. And so while I agree with you that we're going slower than I want to, or than ideally we would, we're trying to find that right balance. And there's a piece that one of the things that makes situations like this more unsafe is when it's not well done and when it's chaotic. And so it's almost the case that as we're rolling out Alice, that we're still following the old protocol, right? And so we're being like trying to be thoughtful about not creating a situation where we get a real call or a false call and create a sense that is more dangerous than otherwise. And so that's I think what we're trying to balance. And again, I think we can move probably faster than we are, and that's the tension.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
I'm going to go to Vice Chair Bondo, and then we'll come to Representative Murillo.
Yeah, I'm good because my question was already answered when both Bryden just asked about the SOPs. So I just have a little follow-up for better comprehension. So for the training of the staff, it's going to be just once, or it's going to be several trainings? It's going to be happening on those
The standard operating procedures?
Yes.
Yeah. So at least my experience with training, and I'm sure you guys have this when you go through it at your work or in person, is that the training is most effective when it's close in time to when you actually have to do it, right? So if we trained everybody right now on the procedure for enrollment, but really they're not going to do that until this summer, it's not as impactful. And so we're thinking about, and we actually had a conversation earlier today about the calendar and what it looks like to train individuals. And so part of it is also just getting in the habit, right? So part of what we want to do is build this practice that when we do training for individuals, that we provide them with steps and a standard operating procedure. And so we don't want to treat this as create all the standard operating procedures and then train everybody and then implement. We want to just get in this habit that when we're going to do a training for lead secretaries around enrollment, that we're also going to say to them, and here's the sheet you can take back with you, or here's where you can find it on our website that tells you exactly the steps. And so you won't see one training, but you will see training that's job specific in the timeliness of needing to do the work.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Beautiful. Student Representative Muliwa.
I saw that the first thing on the priorities list is to keep equity at the center. What work is being done to ensure that our district is equitable for all students?
So I'm going to invite, I'm just looking over to see if Barrett is able to join. So Barrett Wilkinson's going to join and talk a little bit about the current work, because otherwise I'm going to trip over my words. And so he is fully immersed in this and doing it. I will tell you that there is work that has been started and that part of the strategic plan is getting us to do the question exactly what you're asking, which is what's the impact that we're seeing from that work and where may we need to adjust or go deeper or go faster. And so Barrett, do you want to talk about what's currently going on?
We talked about this a little bit last time. So it's not one thing, which is key for equity work, right? So there's work with staff, training for educators. There's work with students that's related to our curriculum. There's work about how we hire staff through my department, through human resources, that helps ensure a more representative workforce. So those are just 3 areas. But what's really happened with our equity work in the last 7 years since that Portland Promise was passed is that we went from saying like, okay, equity work just happens in the equity kind of bucket of strategic plan, but really equity work has to be a part of all of our strategic work and part of every kind of thing. So it's not like there's equity curriculum work, it's the curriculum work is equity work, right? And so some of that is explicit, which is about things like local Black history, Wabanaki studies, things that were never taught before, making sure those are embedded in the curriculum. But it's also about ensuring equitable access to all curriculum, that all students have access to rigorous, relevant curriculum in their experience pre-K 12. So, you know, some of it is also explicit work like with our adults in the system. So to talk about equity, we do equity literacy professional development. We've done that for 5 years. And schools do that too, right? So the district articulates some specific elements that we want to make sure there's conversations that happen, but then schools have additional dialogue and work related to equity at the school site level. So it happens both you know, from strategic priority work as well as from individual sites. And then we've talked a little bit, and I will bring more copies for you all because I gave them, I think right before you all started, it was before our turnover of our equity hiring toolkit. So we have a resource that we've created and updated since, I think the first time we started it was 2019, which is a really massive resource that guides how we do our hiring. And it's designed around best practices in hiring, but also to help us drive towards having a more representative workforce, because we really do have, while we've made great strides, we've really done some really successful things. We still have a teaching force in particular that is not totally representative of our student body and is below the national levels. So those are just some of the things. But like I said, it's those are some of the big picture things, but it's definitely not just one thing. And we'll talk more about those because they fall into many of our different objectives. So
and I would just add that on the board level also, like making sure that our policies are worded so that equity is baked in, like really interrogating the language, creating policies that are around, like we have an equity policy, which we'll share with you, and other policies to make sure that we're centering the right students. And on that same note, like in January, we're going to do an orientation with all the students, and we can dig a lot deeper into kind of like the past work that's been done to help you get a better context of all the moving pieces. Because I just recognize there's a lot that you're catching up on.
Okay. I still have one more question.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, the question's for him since when you say you want equity to be at the center of our district, what exactly does that look like, and how does the work you're doing align with your vision?
I mean, it's all of those things because it can't just be one thing. So when, to me, this is just, you know, my 2 cents on it. It's about that. It's about who we hire, how we hire them. It's about the experience students have. It's about what opportunities students have. If they have, you know, if students as a group have equitable opportunity, like access to lots of different things that is in line with what, you know, what they're passionate about, but also, you know, that makes sure that they're all getting a very high quality education throughout our system. So to me, it's about making sure that all of us, students and adults in the system, are moving in the same direction and saying like, yeah, this is a priority and we want and need this. And informing that collaboratively. Yeah, among other things. But the biggest thing that, you know, I've thought about is really that it can't just be like one thing, right? It's not just like, oh, we should have student affinity groups, right? Like BSUs and LGBTQ organizations, stuff like that. Like, that's great, but it can't be just that we point to and say, well, that's fine. This is good enough because we have this, right? It's that, it's, how we hire, it's the curriculum, it's all of those things together that help, center us around equity.
Okay, and I asked this in the last meeting, but yeah, since the last meeting, what work are you doing to ensure that you're getting input from students as well?
Me personally, or our whole system?
I guess the whole system.
Great question. We have a student advisory. We have, we work with folks who work at the school level to have student voice elevated. We have, students sitting on our school board. So it's not just one thing. It has to happen throughout. I mean, my work is a little more removed from students, honestly, because I'm human resources now. So, so that is a little separate, but yeah, that's at least a partial answer.
But if I can just also layer onto it, and maybe this is a slightly unsatisfying answer, I think in many cases, it's actually about us going slow enough to make sure that we capture student voice. So earlier, student rep McDonald asked about whether a student is on the steering committee and being really intentional to make sure that we had a student representation on the steering committee and that we had alum that had gone through. And part of the organizational diagnostic that started was actually really interrogating our data, not from a high level with just an average, but really breaking it down by subgroup to look at what was the experience. I will be honest that I think from one meeting to the next, you may not see as much of a change as you will when you look at it from a slightly higher level from across multiple months. And so that's where we're trying to do it, because I think sometimes actually it's really easy to make quick decisions. Quick decisions, everything from, whether or not students got dismissed yesterday or stayed in the building, to when a concert is rescheduled, what time is it rescheduled for? And oftentimes those types of quick decisions actually center the white perspective and the white majority versus actually taking the time to say, all right, let's start with our historically marginalized families and communities, and what is the solution that works there. I think that's where we need to be intentional about going slow to get it right, and not just make a quick decision.
Okay. I definitely think it's important to as soon as we can try to get input from students. And FYI, if you want to go to Deering, if anyone's interested in going to Deering and visiting the BSU, would like to give our perspective on how to make the district more equitable. So FYI, if you want to,
Sure.
Yes,
we
totally loved it.
Actually, I've been and do that. And I would also just we actually had the opportunity in Ms. Knorr's office to have one of the initial conversations around the listen and learn with students at Deering. And so completely, we'll do that. We're always looking for opportunities to engage students, and it's often easier to engage in that sort of setting than just standing in the middle of the hall. So, yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. And I think also in the new year, I would love to work with all of you, and the board would also, not just me, but figuring out how to better utilize the feedback that you're hearing within your schools to bring that here, that we're just more intentional about that it's not just you that is here, but you are bringing the opinions and thoughts of your colleagues and peers too. I have a student representative Kantiba, then I have a student representative Rosado, and then I think I saw a hand over here.
All I wanted to say is I've been to BSU and all. And so, and I think but I am a retired school teacher and can get there during the day. So I just wanted to let you know, I think the wish is there.
Okay.
Beautiful. All right, student representative Kantiba, it's all you.
Yeah, thank you. I have a few questions. The first one is, what is your vision for education in the community? And how does it support the economy and quality of life in the community? This is the first one. I don't know if I can go with all of them or one by one.
It's up to you. We can do them all at once. That's probably easier.
Yeah, and the second one is how should the district address underperforming schools? And I think the two last is does the school district have agreement with the city? And the last one is what is the status of student academic achievement in our district?
And the last one, when you asked, it was about student achievement or?
Yes, what is the status of student academic achievement in our district?
Got you. So one, I feel like the first one's a pretty big question. And so let me just share a quick piece and then happy to talk more in depth about it at a time where we can sit down and really get into it. So I believe that actually the tagline of Portland Public Schools really captured why I was interested in working here and what I believe, which is that we want to make sure that all students graduate from us prepared and empowered to be successful. I don't think that that means that all students need to choose to go to college immediately after graduating. I think it means that they're able to make choices of what they want to do, that they have the academic skill, they have the social emotional skill, they have the self-regulation, all of those pieces to be successful in their choice, whether that is pursuing a job with a living wage, whether that is pursuing the military, college, or another option. And I think that's a reason why, you know, I wore the Paths jacket here today, is because I'm a firm believer in career and technical education. One, just because I think it's a great way to learn, even if you're not going to go into that field. But two, because it provides that opportunity. The second piece is the way that we're looking at the data right now and that we did in the organizational diagnostic was really to get a starting spot of where do we have successes and where do we have challenges. And it is certainly the case, and Chair Lentz shared many of the stories last night at the State of the Schools, that we have many successes. And it's also the case that we have many challenges. And so the hope is that the strategic plan is really addressing that, which is how do we make sure, starting with historically marginalized students, how do we make sure that we're centering them and their experience to make sure that they get an academic program that prepares them to be successful, that they do it in a school environment where they love to go to school, where our staff are supported to help students be successful, and where our systems serve to enhance our academics instead of become a distraction or a burden from them. And so our strategic plan is really designed to dig into this question of where do we have pockets of need and how are we successfully addressing it through those strategies. The third question is, I think what we could do, Student Representative Kantiba, is share with you the organizational diagnostic, and it will give you a really good sense of where we stack up, both as a city relative to the state, as well as where we have those successes and where we have those challenges. And you will see what we've talked about throughout tonight, that again, while we have a more diverse student population, we are relatively competitive to the state. In some cases, we are stronger. In some cases, we are weaker. And that's not the benchmark that we are going for. The benchmark we are going for is that all students leave us prepared and empowered. And so we have work to do with that. And so what we can do is commit to sharing with everybody here, because we've had a turnover in board members, the organizational diagnostic, which will help give you that academic achievement results.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Student Representative Rosado.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So my question is about the Alice active shooting shooter protocol. So today's the first time I've ever heard about the shooting protocol, and my question is, what exactly does it consist of?
Yeah, so I'm wondering if I give it a shot and then Deputy Superintendent Townsend just cleans up where I go a little bit. So let me go back just a step. So the again, this was what I was sharing before, right? That it used to be the case that when there was an active shooter, it was lock the door and hide in the corner. And what police found was you sometimes had more victims than would have otherwise happened because the shooter was going into those rooms. And so they set up a protocol where it's designed to be really transparent to the staff in the building about exactly what's going on, right? So it used to be back in the day, like when I was in school, that you'd use code words. And you'd say things like, the elevator repairman's in the building, despite the fact that you had no elevator. But that was a sign that there was something of crisis. We've gotten rid of that language in Alice. So now you would hear somebody go on the intercom and say exactly what's happening. It then is providing that information to staff to be able to help make informed decisions at the classroom level about what the right response is. And the three potential responses are to shelter in place, are to leave, to flee, to run, and the third is to fight. And those decisions and why we communicate it openly about what's going on is so that a teacher can make a decision about that. So we're in the Casco Bay Great Room right now, right? And if there was a report of an active shooting happening on the third floor in the other part of the building, right, over in Pat's, somebody in this room would make the decision to leave the building, right? And so it's giving the power and the decision-making at that level. And so that's what's happening. If you heard on the flip side that it was something going on right outside, you would shelter in place or fight. And so that's what's happening there, is the decision on it. We've been going through a series of trainings around this and a series of rollouts. And again, not as fast as we may want, and the tension of getting it right, as opposed to building muscle and the wrong practice. And so that rollout has included leadership training in August. It has included that we have been doing at each school. We've had the trainer from the police department come and work with, I believe, the leadership and the staff at the school level to do a training so that they're doing it with the police department. And then the third stage is what Dr. Warren talked about, which is really about then providing the training for students and to understand. And because those are the three different actions that happen in Alice, they also match up with the other drills we do. And so that's why we've been strategic at the school level about staging the drills. And so that's why you've done a shelter in place. That's why you've done a fire. And the third piece that would come from it is the full Alice.
Okay, so the three possible responses are shelter in place, flee, fight.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so see, we've done two. The fleeing, obviously, the beginning of the year, and then shelter in place. Are students going to be trained in like what fighting would be? Like what would that look like if?
Yeah, so let me pass it to Deputy Superintendent who can talk about exactly.
Yeah.
But the answer at the broadest sense is no, not in the way that you are thinking, or I'm assuming. But let me have him talk specifically.
Yeah, I mean, it's more an introduction to know that that's an option, if that situation comes down and how one might respond, and kind of what the drills look like at that is really more scenario based. So it's kind of talking through different things, like you're in a classroom up here and something's over here. What might you do? And so, there may be instances of actually executing on some of that, but a lot of it is because that's the big shift from just like one response, right, to trying to empower folks to have some agency to make the safest choice, talking through different scenarios and working with that. And so that's part of why this tension of making sure that's a big shift for adults. I mean, adults take very seriously their responsibility around safety, and that's it's a quite different paradigm than just following instructions, right? And so that's part of why this follow-up and the engagement with PPD for staff to grow comfortable, right, to be able to support students in that context has been part of, the tension we're managing around the deliberateness, and then to bring that forward, to students and so forth to understand options.
Would adults be using the term Alice in the classroom to talk to young people, or are they just talking about the procedures?
I mean, no, and I can share some resources. We have some stuff on the website that is like an FAQ, and so things like that we published at the beginning of the year. Yeah, they would talk about it. It's, the acronym stands for alert, tell people what's happening, right? That there's a threat that exists. L is lockdown. Let's pause for a minute while we get more information. I is inform. That's, as Dr. Scowen said, giving that real-time, clear, descriptive information, right? ALI, thank you. That's the counter, right? Or evacuate, right? Is the kind of additional options that's, you might choose to, maintain safety.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent. Do you want to, is this around Alice? I'm wondering if it might be worth in the orientation, taking a deeper dive in this. Do we want to keep going?
I mean, I would suggest that because the feedback is certainly heard about the urgency.
Yeah.
And it is about balancing the doing this in a safe and effective way. Right? Because one of the things we want to make sure that we do not do is build the wrong habit where we are training folks in a new protocol, not doing it the way that we should be doing it, and then needing to adjust. And so maybe we can put this on the orientation as well as the board retreat and having a conversation about it then.
Yeah, that sounds great. And that will also mean that we'll collect your questions in advance too, so we can make sure that we get to everything you're interested in. Student Rep McDonald, do you have a question about something else?
I do, and it's hopefully quick. But going back to the strategic plan again, I was wondering if you could go, one of the priorities listed was like the whole student connected community, cultivating inclusivity and belonging. And I was wondering if like the hope of increasing student engagement was kind of included in that. And if it is, if you could go into a little bit more depth of how this strategic plan would help student engagement and like the whole like attendance problem and things like that.
So it is included in there. I think it would be premature to tell you exactly what that looks like, right? That's the goal of the steering committee, to figure out how do we do this. And so part of the work that the steering committee does is, and what the design teams will do each year, depending on the initiative, is really dig into what the research says, as well as what the student experience says, and how do we do that. And so just as a very simple example, one of the ways that is done at Casco Bay is around crew, right? And the idea of how do we build community in a way where students feel safe and welcome, and that they're part of a community. At the elementary school level, we see that with our system of PBIS, right, of positive behavior intervention system. And so those are some of the ways. The exact strategies that will exist in the strategic plan when it comes to this are still in development.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, Representative Knight, go ahead.
Yeah, I have some questions about the equity work. So I don't know if you want to call someone up for that or if you want to take those yourself. So my first questions are about the trainings. I wanted to know if we're taking advantage of local queer, people of color, disabled activist groups to teach us about how we should handle these things like directly from these nonprofits or just overall groups. And I also wonder is our, like when it comes to student equity, I'm wondering if there is active blanket, say like in history class, are we working to make all of our classes equitable, or is it just a staff position? Like, is the staff where we're starting and focusing on, or are we also trying to tackle students as well?
And can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean when you say about tackling the students as well?
Well, I don't mean jump them. So,
I mean, I was going with where Jaden was asking about the fight. So response, no, but what were you meaning there?
I mean, are we like as we've been saying there, you can't go from one direction. It has to come from everywhere, right? So you can't just make staff more diverse. You also have to make sure that the way that you are bringing up the newer generations is following the goals you have. So say it is not mandatory to take an African history class. It is not mandatory to take a queer history class. It's not like these things are not mandatory, and they are electives, which is a good thing. But it also means that if neither of those aspects are being worked into consistent default courses, that we lose part of the equity, because the people who want to take African history or the people who want to take queer history tend to be part of those groups themselves, just because they want to either know more about themselves and their history, or because they want the easy grade. And so I'm just wondering what we are doing to make the masses more equitable, because I feel like there are several cases in several classes where there are chances to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't, of course, speak for Deering or Casco because I don't go to either of those. But there are classes that could just be more inclusive, like take freshman seminar. I don't know if you're familiar in depth with it. But that class is a great way to bring equity into everyday life, because that class was here's how to have a job interview, here's how to write a resume, here's how to tolerate other people, here's how to make sure that you're losing unbiased opinions. Those go together. I feel like here's how to function in the real world. And I'm just worried that with our focus on staff, while staff is important, we cannot focus on making just our staff more diverse and training them, because training only goes so far. There has to be a level of blanket equity where we have to go, okay, everybody needs to know a little bit about this or that, right?
Gotcha. So thank you for the clarity. That's helpful. I will invite, I didn't know if Barrett was standing there, Barrett to come up in a second to address it. I want to differentiate a little bit behind what is getting progress monitored tonight and what was shared at another session, right? Which is why I think Board Chair Lentz brought up the idea of making sure we include it in the orientation. I think what you just mentioned is a lot of things that, as we think about the strategic plan and we think about what our equity work should be, are things that we need to be considering and making sure that it lives there, right? And so I want to differentiate between the strategic plan is sort of intentional on the fact that it's not necessarily what we're doing now, but where we could get better and where we could enhance our work. And so I think that is a part of it. I think there are also pieces where there's intentional programming that happens, right? So we have Wabanaki Studies that has launched, that Portland Public Schools is a leader in, maybe the only district that's really doing it. But that is an example of where we are catching voice and perspective that wasn't historically taught in classrooms and making sure that it's not just taught, but it's named as a priority. We have similar work going on around Black history and making sure that that exists there. There's also a piece around how do we make sure that we create schools where all students feel comfortable and welcome and are part of a community that represents them. And so there's work that happens there, not just around our school climate and how we talk to students and how we think about the work, but also in examples of having a Title IX staff member who, when issues come up, we have an obligation and we have staff that investigate them and follow up on them to make sure that when we do have missteps, that we're addressing that. And that could be around an adult, that could be around a student piece. And so that does exist now. And part of the reason that we're naming this in our strategic plan as a priority is because we know we're not there yet, right? And so when I first started and we shared about the strategic plan steering committee idea, we talked about it being that we're on a journey and that we have a ways to go. We've certainly traveled, right? And traveled a long way. and we still have further to go. And so that's what we're really trying to capture in the steering committee and in the strategic plan. So I think you will see those pieces as we get further into exactly what the initiatives look like. But because you did ask some specific questions about how we capture feedback from specific communities, I'm going to have Barrett respond to that.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, so again, it's never just one thing. And I can't really speak to the curriculum side. That's not my expertise. But in terms of how we've engaged different community partners, we used originally an organization called the Center for Education Equity, which helped us do really helped us plan out and map out how we were going to do staff training. And I'm talking about staff, but that's just an example because that's my lens, but that's not the whole thing at all. Because at schools, I mean, all of you go to different schools, you've seen different ways in which this is alive at your school site, right? So there's like student affinity groups, there's like different events, and all those things are like come up from students that are led from there. So like last year, there was a really cool event at Deering on like the history of drag. Packed room, optional for kids, but it was like, tons of people were, anyway. So all of like, those are kind of things where they invited in people to come and present and, share some history on that. It was amazing. Anyway, we've partnered with our multilingual department to really ensure that we have, for staff training around, so people really understand the issues and needs of multilingual students. And as multilingual staff, they're also sharing their perspective and experiences, right? We've partnered with Maine Transgender Network, with Equality Maine. We've had them as guest speakers for staff. And then they've also done things with students. We've had the Holocaust Human Rights Center. We've worked with them. Those are just in the last few years. And so that's like at the district level. And so like schools do some of those things on their own too, right? Like they might invite in a guest speaker from, somewhere. I know like the BSU at Deering is constantly inviting in folks to come meet with students and be guest speakers and talk with them about their work or whatever it is. So those are just some examples off top of mind of like how we've done that. Yeah. Is that helpful?
That is really helpful, especially knowing more about the district side of it. There is a larger part of me that would like to know more about the curriculum, but you do staff things, and so I can't ask you about curriculum.
I can send you a couple of recordings because we have talked about that recently about the community people and how we're kind of holding ourselves accountable.
Yeah, just incredible stuff from that team too. I mean, there's real expertise, and it lives within our staff too. Like that have that expertise, and anyway, more on that.
Yeah, and then beautiful.
Add one thing.
Yes, and then I'm going to move us along.
It's true that we're doing a lot of good work, but I just want to acknowledge how much more needs to be done.
Oh, yeah.
And we haven't articulated decolonizing the curriculum. We've talked about Wabanaki's studies and African studies, but we need to decolonize the curriculum overall. I know my daughter at Deering took a 10th grade English class last year where every single book they read was by a white man. And this is 2013, 2012. I mean, we can't continue on that path. So I just want to acknowledge what you're saying and we're making progress. There's a lot of amazing work, but we still have a long ways to go.
Of course. I have one yes or no question and then I'm done. No explanation. Yeah. Do we, as the board, get to compile the 5-year plan as we go, or is that?
So the steering committee is working on that, and that will come to the board for review and a vote. But we will not be, as a board, creating that. Ryan?
Yeah, and I would just say that I think based on everything you've asked about in terms of making sure that we have perspective, is that we actually don't want to create a dynamic where it is simply done in this room. But we want to make sure, as the board is the governing body, that you are reviewing it and saying, yep, this matches, because it's going to guide our work for the next 5 years.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you all for your questions. So I'm going to move us now into the report of the secretary. So we have consideration and action to approve the meeting minutes of December 5th, 2023. Are there any corrections to those meeting minutes? Yes, Vice Chair Bondo?
Yes, it's a little correction on the report of the chair. We can just change, I'm not the chair of the Policy and Curriculum Committee.
Yes, yes. You are not the chair of the Policy and Curriculum Committee. I made a mistake when I said that out loud. It is actually Board Member Billiou who's going to be taking that role. Good work, Vice Chair Bondo. Okay, so we will make sure to change that in the notes. Any other corrections? Okay, so then we're going to approve those minutes with that correction. And then we have consent items, everybody's favorite part of a board meeting. Take it away, Deputy Superintendent.
All right. Under Board Policy KCD, the school board accepts by unanimous consent contributions made to the school district of durable goods of significant value and of symbolic importance. As required by policy, all of the donations are listed in the board memo by name and donation accompanying this item. Our practice is that each donor receives a written contribution acknowledgement expressing our heartfelt gratitude and for their tax purposes. So with that, I would like to thank the many contributors to the Portland Public Schools that have made donations. Those include to the Gerald E. Talbot Community School, the following gifts. Kimberly Tremblay of Portland donated underwear for the student clothing closet. Chrissy DiBiase of Portland donated student snacks and gloves. Park Danforth Care of Mandy Yates of Portland donated hand knit mittens and hats. Always a personal favorite on this list. Adam Siegel and Kathy Edelman, JCA of Southern Maine, and Joe Bornstein, Winter Warmth Drive of Portland, donated 124 pairs of winter boots. And the Stevens Ave Congregational Church of Portland donated hats, mittens, and gloves. Additionally, Paths received a donation of a 2006 Toyota Corolla from Allison Perkins of Gorham for use in the Vehicle Repair and Maintenance Vocational Education Program. Thank you to all of those donors. We're very grateful for their support of our work.
Thank you very much. And now I'm going to move us into old business. So we have two policies up for second reads tonight. And just as a reminder on where policies come from before they get to second reads. So policies are worked on within the Policy and Curriculum Committee. They're workshopped, they're amended, and then they come to the board for first read, which is what we did at the meeting last time. And then when they come back for second reads, generally, unless there's something big that we've missed, they are up for a vote. And it's less about changing the policy and more about voting it through. So with that context, we have the consideration and action to approve changes to policy JHB, which is our truancy policy. Is there a motion to approve the changes for policy JHB truancy? Thank you, Board Member Bryden. Is there a second? Thank you, Vice Chair Bondo. Any questions on the motion? Okay, seeing none. Any public comment on the motion? Just double check. Okay, I see no public comment. I'm going to close public comment. Any board discussion? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I just had a quick question.
Yeah, of course.
Who is the student assistant team, and is that like a team that's already existing, or is there going to be a team that's going to be
within each school? There are teams that look at a variety of data points, including attendance, to think about interventions for individual students.
Okay. And so it said with the truancy, it would come to like, let's say, if the truancy is existing and happening over and over again, that the parent, the student, and the superintendent will have meetings. So let's say we get to that point and the parent sends the child to school, but then the child decides, I'm not going to go to school and skips on their own. What kind of like process will happen?
At that point, that's potentially, we'll continue to try and intervene of like, what's the issue for the student in terms of, not wanting to attend, right? I mean, that's what it always comes back to, right? I mean, we're trying to come back to is like, what's the barrier for attendance, to try and resolve that, I mean, in that case, if the parent, it's not an issue from the parent perspective, right? It's us trying to work collaboratively with them to resolve that issue, right? At times, there is, discipline and consequence, though that's not always effective, right? And so trying to understand the kind of root causes of the issue.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, Board Member Ali. Any other discussion? Yes, Representative Knight.
I just wanted to know if this policy is going to give blanket numbers on like how many excused absences or unexcused, or if that's like an individual school choice.
It's not an individual school choice in the compulsory attendance law. There's only certain designated things that count as excused absences, and everything else is kind of considered unexcused. So there's a very specific list of what can be considered excused. So sickness, like things like that, right? Can be one, just an important one to acknowledge is homelessness, or students who are like having attendance issues as a result of experiencing, kind of housing instability is also counted as excused. We're not going to like double up on them. So those are a couple examples of what's on that list.
Let me clarify. I mean, is this policy putting a number to how many absences excused or unexcused? Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask what those numbers are for excused versus unexcused before there is serious action?
Yeah, and that is one of so those are all defined at the state level as part of state policy. So we're adopting, some of the policy that's been in place. So it's, generally it's about 10 days of unexcused absence is considered truancy. There's a bit of a distinction depending on how old you are, how many of those days are consecutive absence versus cumulative, like over the course of the year of unexcused absences. But it's generally, just refreshing my memory here, but yes, what does it say? 10 days of absence or 7 consecutive unexcused absences.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Beautiful. Okay, seeing no other hands, let's go ahead and do a roll call vote, please.
Great. Member Ali?
I approve. Is that what I say?
Yes. So for policies, the choices for your answer are yes, no, or abstain.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Great. Vice Chair Bondo?
Yes.
Member Bryden?
Yes.
Member Figdor?
Yes.
Member Grant?
Yes.
Member Noor?
Yes.
Member Opperman?
Yes.
Student Representative Kintiba?
Yes.
Student Representative Knight?
Yes.
Student Rep McDonald?
Yes.
Student Representative Rosado?
Yes.
Student Representative Muriwa?
Yes.
And Chair Lentz?
Yes. So the motion passes unanimously with the students voting with the board. And so then next up, we have another policy. This is the consideration and action to approve changes to policy JKAA-JKAA-R, which is the use of physical restraint and seclusion. Is there a motion to approve the changes to this policy? Thank you, Board Member Opperman. Is there a second? Thank you, Board Member Bryden. Any questions on the motion?
Sorry. Is this being sent to parents and will it be translated?
Great question.
All of the policies are now on our new website, or are linked on the website, so it'll be updated pending our approval here. And so that can be viewed, in multiple languages. Families can view it that way.
Great. Any other? Yep.
Can I ask what the requirements for being taught how to use this are, or should that happen in a little bit?
Yeah, let's cover that, and we can look at that in orientation if you have a burning question about that. Yeah, and this will be mostly about the motion itself. Anything behind that we'll cover separately. Okay, great question. Any other questions on the motion? Yeah.
Well, I was just reading through the draft, and I was just a little bit unclear on when like when it states it's appropriate to use the physical restraint? If that's like a super long question, then it's okay.
No, that's okay. Do you want to?
And that is, there is language that's part of the update of like imminent physical harm is the standard. So it's really like an option of last resort is what it's intended. And part of the language again here, many of these changes are driven by updates to both the state law that happened a couple years ago, and then the Department of Education at the state level rewrote the rules. It's called Chapter 33 is the set of rules that address this. And so it was to kind of continue to emphasize that as like last resort, and imminent physical harm is the only time in which you should utilize these practices.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, good questions. Any other questions? Just double check. Okay, then we're going to move to public comment for this motion. Okay, I see no hands here or on Zoom. We're going to close public comment. Any board discussion? Yeah, go ahead.
So I asked this at our last meeting, but because we were bringing this up today, we didn't get into it. What are the repercussions for misuse of physical restraint?
I mean, just, our employee discipline practices, depending on the severity of it, and there have been instances where we've had to issue, various levels of employee discipline if somebody has used it inappropriately.
What are those levels? Like say that I am not participating in a physical altercation but am just present and viewing, say because of a hallway, and a teacher believes that I am participating and am being active in this, and I'm not, and I am restrained. What happens to that teacher?
I mean, the levels of kind of discipline, depending on a circumstance and would follow an investigation, include, a verbal warning is the kind of entry point, right? Up to a written warning or letter of reprimand, to a suspension, to recommendation for termination. So those are some of the, steps in our kind of employee progressive discipline.
Perfect. Thank you. And then my final question is, what are, last meeting we discussed that not every teacher would be trained how to use physical restraint due to safety and general concern. What are the requirements a teacher needs to meet to be able to learn how to use physical restraint?
Well, I wouldn't say there are requirements they need to meet. I mean, certainly there are physical requirements, right? Just in terms of the role and function, right, to be able to do that. But it's more kind of programmatically situated where the places where we tend to see the need for this. So, there are very few instances of kind of the, this version of application really at the secondary level. I think for, somewhat just because of the size of students, it's much harder, right? So it's often concentrated in some of our specialized programs in terms of for students with special needs.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other board discussion? Okay, then Board Member Grant.
Not really the nature of discussion, but maybe just flagging. I'd love to see some follow-up on this, like in a year's time or something. I can tell you with my other hat on that this is a mess in terms of trying to legislate this type of behavior. It's very hard to write in words what's proper and what's not, and I've just seen it flare up in other places in the state. I would be curious just to see how it works on the ground. Really to take back to policymakers, because they've been massaging and changing this over time and trying to make it better, and I don't think it gets better. But anyway, I just want to flag it for a follow-up at some point down the road. I'm going to support the policy. I just want to know what happens, in the next year or so with it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, then let's go ahead and do a roll call vote, please.
Member Ali,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bondo,
Yes.
Member Bryden,
Yes.
Member Figdor,
Yes.
Member Grant,
Yes.
Member Noor,
Yes.
Member Opperman,
Yes.
Student Representative Kintiba,
Yes.
Student Representative Knight,
No.
Student Representative McDonald,
Yes.
Student Representative Rosado,
Yes.
Student Representative Muriwa,
Yes.
and Chair Lentz.
Yes. So the motion passes with the majority of students voting with the board. And I know it's just about time for a break, but I'm just going to keep us going because I think we can end before a break. So up next we have personnel. Here comes Spirit.
All right, it's a long walk around. So you have just one teacher on a 1-year only contract to review. Just for new folks, we do this once a month. For any personnel that comes, the board approves all principal and teacher, so PEA, Portland Education Association, and PAA, Portland Administrators Association appointments. After we cross the midpoint in the year, they would be temporary, so we won't come end of January. We won't be doing this as regularly as we do in the first part of the year. So again, sorry, just one for a 1-year only appointment for pre-K.
Beautiful. And just one other note on process around personnel. When we are voting on personnel, we don't ever talk about specific people. That's just generally how we operate here at the board level. So if there's anything about a specific person, you would want to follow up outside of a board meeting so that it's not in a public format. So do I have a motion for the consideration and action to approve this personnel item for the election of one teacher candidate for 1 year only? Did I see your hand? Can I see your hand? No. Can I get a motion? Thank you. Board Member Bryden, we're going to give it to you. Second, Board Member Figdor. So we don't take public comment on personnel items. Are there any questions from the board? Yes, Board Member Grant.
In the spirit of all of us getting to know each other, I will just state now, instead of having to do it time after time, that I do abstain from these types of votes because my day job is representing the employees union, several of them, in fact. So I don't vote on the hiring decisions.
Thank you.
Just to let you all know.
Yes, Vice Chair Bondo.
Yes, I just have a clarification. Can you just go back to the 1 year? So I mean, after 1 year, do we need to hire another teacher to that same position, or we just need that position just for 1 year and that's it?
This one is just for 1 year only, so it could depend. Okay. Sometimes it's because someone is on a leave for the year. Sometimes it's based on funding. So the 1 year only just means this position is only guaranteed for 1 year. Sometimes we have both 1 year only and permanent positions. I don't know off top of mind what is for this particular one, but that's generally what it's about.
Okay, because when I see that is really a specific position, then that's why I'm kind of little wonder how the rotation can happen after a year, because that's a pre-K special education.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So I'll keep following on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Nope. Yeah.
All right. I just sort of had a question about like this process in general. So I'm just like, I totally understand that it's like a personal, like a privacy thing to not discuss the person, but how, like if we're voting yes for this person, then like how do we know that like we want this person to actually be a teacher?
That's a really great question. Do you want to talk about, do you want to?
Can I jump in and answer?
Go ahead.
So I think there's really two things you are doing as board members when it comes to personnel. One is you are holding us accountable as staff to make sure that we have done a thorough vet from the interview process to checking references. And so that's one piece. Right. So this is to make aware and to be public about who we are hiring so that if this person's name was Amy Scallon, right, you may raise a question around nepotism or that type of piece. But in general, it is, that's my wife. Yes. She's the real Dr. Scallon. But it is like that simple a check. And then the second piece is one of the biggest parts that the board has is around fiscal stewardship. And so this is also making sure and holding us accountable that there is a position. And for, I think, efficiency purposes, right, we don't go through the granular piece of it each time, but that's why.
And just to confirm, we are, like, the interview process has happened, references has been checked as of this point for this person.
Yeah, there's some inherent trust that happens in the systems that get us these people. on the
Okay,
docket.
so we're just kind of like trusting that the processes that they've already gone through are enough to like qualify for this position, and we're like just establishing that that's okay.
We're dotting I's and crossing T's.
Yeah, and if you wanted to ask that question, you certainly could. You would find that it's the same answer each time. And then the last piece that Deputy Superintendent Townsend just reminded me of is, well, these are the best practices. Also, state law requires that it happen.
That's what I was going to say.
And so that is a piece as well. And so again, like we could each time do it. You would just find that it's the same answer each time. And so that's why we don't do it.
Thank you so much.
No, great questions. Okay, then by roll call vote, please indicate whether you are in favor of this personnel item. Deputy Superintendent, please call the roll.
Member Ali,
Yes.
Member Bondo, Vice Chair Bondo, apologies.
Yes.
Member Bryden,
Yes.
Member Figdor,
Yes.
Member Grant,
Abstain.
right. Member Noor,
Yes.
Member Opperman,
Yes.
Student Representative Kintiba,
Yes.
Student Representative Knight,
Yes.
Student Representative McDonald,
Yes.
Student Representative Rosado,
Yes.
Student Representative Muriwa,
Yes.
and Chair Lentz.
Yes. So the motion passes unanimously with students voting with the board. And now we're going to adjourn. So could anyone move to adjourn the meeting? Thank you, Board Member Bryden. You're good on your motions today. Is there a second? I saw Board Member Ali. All in favor? We can do this by hand. We don't have to call a vote. Beautiful. Then we are adjourned at 8:06 p.m. Thank you all.